welcome to your Security Plus briefing on frameworks and architectures, as presented by the 8570 Branch, 336 Training Squadron, Keesler Air Force Base, and Biloxi, Mississippi. Now, before we get started, the disclaimer: there are different types of frameworks out there, frameworks and architectures. The things we will not be speaking of today are exploitation frameworks, OA frameworks, programming frameworks. Our discussion is going to be confined to security frameworks. Now, before we discuss the first slide, essentially what a framework is it's template. They are ready-made out there, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So, and the goal of these frameworks is to satisfy two things. A, to make sure that your network security policies are what they should be, and also to make sure that you are complying with any applicable United States or international regulations. So let's get down to business here with the first bullet. Security policies require security plans. Now, ideally, these documents should cover your organization's overall business strategies and security goals, while tying in all of the details such as valuable information assets and systems, the security controls that must protect them, and how inside and outside users interact with them. The second bullet, security documentation requires you to have a documented plan, and that's essentially what this is, for each step of the process, as well as supporting documents and methodologies to tie the big picture together. And as we can see at the bottom here, these documents are the components used to achieve security. A thing to remember on this is that you might hear them called frameworks, policies, guidelines, standards, and so on. But each of these has a specific meaning, and even if there is a lot of overlap between them. All right, let's get down to the heart of the matter, the specifics of frameworks. Our definition from the 501 guide: a program or blueprint that documents the overall processes you need to design policies achieving specific security needs. That's a mouthful, isn't it? But essentially, it is your big plan for network security while making sure you're complying with regulations. The thing to remember here is that a good framework will be designed and maintained by a certification body, a standards organization drawing from the practices and experience of a wide range of policy professionals and organizations with similar needs. It may include a wide variety of more specific documents, or it might just be a structure for you to develop your own. Again, why reinvent something when you already have perfectly good templates that are the product of much experimentation, failures, and successes in the network security realm? In any case, beyond network security, perhaps the most important reason to use a framework is that they are a vehicle to your organization being in compliance with regulations. Sorry to be redundant there, but I can't stress that enough. We live in a regulation-driven world, and using one of these frameworks achieve that second goal, along with the first goal we spoke of, having a excellent network security framework. Hey, there are several common frameworks in use in both information technology and in general for security in particular. Some popular ones are this first one, the NIST standard. As you can see there, the NIST 800 series is a policy framework describing cybersecurity standards and best practices for the United States federal government. Now, while NIST 800 is designed for government agencies to follow, it contains a lot of useful guidelines for other organizations as well, and it's available free of charge. The related but separate NIST cybersecurity framework is a shorter but high-level security framework designed to give standard guidelines and language for cybersecurity in the private sector. Let's move on to ISO. The ISO 27000 series is a very broad policy framework containing security guidelines for all sorts of organizations. This one, it's a very comprehensive framework with specific documents for individual security areas. Like other ISO standards, it includes a certification process that you can demonstrate your compliance with to business partners. Let's look at a couple more frameworks. Next slide, Fobert, the Control Objectives for Information and Related Technologies. It's a framework published by ISACA and an IT professional association. The most recent version of this is Fobert 5, which is a very popular framework for complying with the Sarbanes-Oxley rules. You might ask, what is Sarbanes-Oxley? Well, I'll tell you. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, or SOX, is a federal law that applies to publicly traded companies and public accounting firms that do business in the United States. It specifies how company financial data must be retained and protected from undocumented changes. And the second bullet, ITL, the Information Technology Infrastructure Library, is published by Axelos, a joint venture of the United Kingdom, or the British government, and Capital plc. Compared to similar frameworks such as Fobert, ITL is more focused on the service, again, the service aspect of IT, providing more detail and specific implementation, but less on underlying principles. So, what framework should be implemented? Well, it depends on the needs of your organization. The big thing here is to balance the ease of adoption with the relative comprehensiveness of the individual framework. You can even try to combine two or more frameworks to suit your organization's needs. Look for frameworks that are required by or designed to support regulations that you need to comply with or are part of your national security guidelines. So, again, I alluded to this at the beginning. Instead of building your own security framework from the ground up, you can save a lot of time and risk by choosing a framework that suits, excuse the misprint there, that suits your business and security needs. While a framework isn't a complete organization-specific policy set, it should contain detailed advice and techniques you can use to design a set of customized policies. Additionally, since it uses common language and structures, it's easy to learn from the success or mistakes of other organizations that share your framework. Again, why reinvent the wheel here? So now we'll go into a few of the different regulations, and we already spoke to Sarbanes-Oxley. Some of the important regulations to be aware of when working within the United States are as follows. First, you have FSMA, and you can read that as well as I can. It's a law applying to all federal agencies. It requires every agency to develop, document, and implement an information security and protection plan. And HIPAA, most of us are probably familiar with HIPAA. Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act specifies who can access or use PHI, and it defines security standards for its storage and access. And this one I happen to know from personal, well, not personal experience, but I am familiar with the fact that this act is one where they're very, very consequential when it comes to penalties for violating these standards. Move on to the next slide. A couple of more lesser-known regulations. FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and that has to do with educational records, as you can see. And then we have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which sets the minimum standards for security of PII stored by financial institutions, and it requires said institutions to inform customers how that data is used and shared. And this has to do with some of these notices we'll get in the mail or via email explaining with whom our bank shares your information with as a result of that act. And the last regulation, at least for now, the PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. It's not a law. Instead, it's administered by the PCI Council, which is an industry consortium. The The standard governs the storage, processing, and transmission of payment card information, i.e. credit cards, and compliance is part of the standard business contract for any organization that wants to process payment cards. So basically, this is your credit card slide. Now, penalties for not complying with these regulations. Probably pretty straightforward. It can severely damage your organization's reputation, be it civilian or military. Fines and other legal penalties, but the kicker is increased vulnerability to attacks that compromise protected data. A few final thoughts. What frameworks do what frameworks do your potential business partners or customer use? So in the interest of harmony and ease of adoption, you might want to look at what your customers or business partners use in terms of security templates or frameworks. This will make the secure sharing of information easier. A final thing to consider is the level of formality. Higher frameworks or higher standards, such as ISO 27000, will imply that your organization attaches a higher level of seriousness to security. However, as is usually the case, it is more difficult and costly to implement than a less prestigious framework. It's sort of the way of the world. Anything that's more worthwhile takes more effort. In any case, frameworks and policies are often broad and high-level treatments that help you to spell out security needs that you have and what kinds of controls will address them. On the other hand, they will usually leave a lot of details optional or up to interpretation, especially when it comes to specific hardware and software process. This means creating your own secure baselines for system configuration and auditing will take extensive technical knowledge and a lot of research. And essentially, this presentation was all lifted from the new SYO 501 Instructor Edition. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and have learned something. Bid you good day.